All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Iconocast here at Southeastern Louisiana University. This is with the Colloquium Group here at the English Department. Today's guest, we are honored to have Dr. Gregory Ulmer. Many of us were introduced to his work last semester, really, with Dr. Samuel Fuller, who it was a digital humanities class, and Dr. Fuller learned it from Victor Vitanza out in Clemson University, and it followed him down here in Hammond at Southeastern Louisiana University. But Dr. Gregory Ulmer, boy, it's been a career, and we'll just try to, we could probably do the rest of the Iconocast episodes just on all the content and material that he has conceived and worked through himself. But today we'll be talking about the apparatus theory, mostly that he developed, and try to move forward. Plenty of books here. Konsult is his latest. Right before that was Avatar Emergency. We were introduced to his work through Homovic's Intervention, and then a collection called Rhetorical Speculations, which had one of his articles in it. But without further ado, we want to welcome and say thank you to Dr. Gregory Ulmer. How are you doing, Dr. Ulmer?
Doing good today. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. We're glad you're here too. But we'll get started. Go ahead, Kendall. What you got for me?
Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your origin story and how you got started?
Yeah. It goes back ways. Depending. I grew up in Miles City, Montana, and it's a little bit out of the way of things. And I have to say that the public library was pretty important for me. And I guess the Carnegie, right over the robber barons, did one good thing there with all those public libraries. I spent a lot of time in the library when I was a kid. But I really wanted to get out of Miles City, Montana. And I think part of the story there is I worked for my dad in a sand and gravel. My dad had a sand and gravel plant. He was educated as a civil engineer. He made concrete products. And sort of the joke there is that I learned from him making concrete products that I wanted nothing to do with concrete products. I want to do abstract products. And yeah, so I went to college, University of Montana in Missoula, and they had requirements for humanities, general education requirements. I never heard of the humanities. I guess they didn't let us know that when he read a book that was the humanities. And I discovered through gen ed, discovered English. I don't know if they even have gen ed requirements anymore, but so I said, wow, you can read books and get a degree doing that. And that led to graduate school. From there, actually what happened was, and I recommend this to all of your students, is I went to Spain as an undergraduate for a year, and that was in 1965, 66. So Generalissimo Franco was still alive and in charge, and his little fascist army was all running around Spain. It was an amazing experience. But what I loved was just living in a language other than my own, living in Spanish. And just everything you did seemed important. Ordering a cup of coffee seemed important. You go into a bodega at night, everybody wanted to talk to you. They hadn't seen a foreigner because of Franco. Spain wasn't really included in the European redevelopment. So all you had to do was say, you like Spain, which who couldn't like Spain, and then the wine was free the rest of the night. But when I got back to college in the University of Montana, I went around to my professors, and I said, living in another language, that's fabulous. What can you do with that? And they said, well, you can go to graduate school. And they said, you can go to graduate school in Spanish. I said, oh, no, I don't want to teach Spanish. But literature, Don Quixote's great. So they told me about comparative literature. I never heard of comparative literature. But the guy said, well, I have a friend. There aren't very many comp lit departments in the country. We said, I have some friends at Brown University. I'd never heard of Brown University. He said, it's an Ivy League. I said, you mean Harvard? It's like Harvard, the Ivy League's got more than that. growing up in Montana, they don't tell you anything. So I got into Brown in comparative literature. And the reason I got in there, it turned out, and this is part of the scary story of anybody's origin story, is that, there's all these chances. I mean, the sort of the way the philosophers say is there's necessity, the automaton, but then there's tuke, the fortune. Like, so whatever the necessity is, then that creates opportunities. And then you either are able to kairos, you're able to strike, you're able to grab the opportunity or not. And you never know what the opportunity is going to be. So I went to Spain basically because that's the only language I'd studied at all. And I went to Spain. I'd have rather gone to Paris, but I went to Spain. It turns out that the founder and head of the comparative literature department of Brown, a wonderful man named Juan Lopez Marias, he was a Spanish exile. He'd fled, from Franco's Spain. Man, here's a guy who was actually studying Franco's Spain. It's like cool, and I got admitted. I was like, I think that was it. I had good grades, but so it was like, but that was the connection that got me in there. Another weird thing was my way got paid by the National Defense Education Act. They don't have that anymore, but that was the good response to Sputnik. So, you don't remember, you haven't read your history, but the United States of America was totally shocked when the Soviets got into space first. They sent Sputnik up. Our rockets would go, and they got in space first. And like nobody could believe it. They said they're all sitting around drinking vodka, right? I mean, what? How did they get in space? And we didn't respect them. So they poured all this money into education to, try to catch up or get ahead or whatever. And that has affected my life a number of ways. But one of the ways it did was it got my way paid to Brown because the comparative literature is almost all for science. But comp lit got in on the tail end, a little bit on the side. Like, I guess, you have to translate for the enemies you capture, I guess, parlez-vous a little bit with them. But anyway, so they paid for that. And while I was graduate school, so I'm getting to the point now. While I was in graduate school, took a course on Rousseau, and I ended up writing my dissertation on Rousseau and the Rousseau tradition, early 20th century, Miguel de Unamuno, Proust, D.H. Lawrence. And I found this book in a bookstore, went over to Boston from Providence, what I don't know where Brown is, bookstore de la Grammatologie, shortly after it was published. And I read French, it looked like it was on Rousseau, and it was on Rousseau, but it was by Jacques Derrida. And I read it, and I couldn't make much sense of it then, but man, I forget about Rousseau. Who's this Derrida guy, and
yeah,
here we are today.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that was nice. I know that you're definitely also, which we'll talk about later, is that kind of that CP Snow's two cultures. Seems like it's always been a part of your journey, your struggle, I would say, between trying to find a way to a compromise between the two or a duality, But so to keep on with your personality, before we dig deeper into the apparatus theory, your books have this format and this structure, and you have this very expressive voice, just like when you're speaking. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's also educational, of course. Why do you choose to write this way? Is this a conscious choice of yours? And as we move forward into Electracy, how are you juggling this identity as a writer and the literate, and while thinking about the electorate?
Yeah, I mean, that, that's part of the joke in my family is around here is like nobody ever told me to write a book that would make money other than everybody in my family. Basically, it's like, why do you write these books? My brother-in-law was a lawyer, very successful lawyer out in the West Coast. And what he used to do when he'd have friends over, his other law partners and stuff, and they'd have a few cocktails. And then for laughs, he'd pull out Applied Grammatology, which was my really first big book on Derrida, post pedagogy. And he'd read it for fun, and he'd laugh. Like he'd just open it at random and read a couple of sentences. Everybody would just laugh hysterically. It's like super funny, So like academic speak or whatever, and out of context or in context even. But so it's like you write the books that you can, I guess, and I do think, I mean, the voice, there's definitely a voice there. And what happened, and I continue my undergrad story. So I went to undergraduate, discovered English, and I majored in creative writing as an undergraduate. And there was a very great poet, and various poets there, but I sort of like wanted to go straight to, it's like, I don't want to just read a bunch of poetry. I want to write poetry, and it's one of those things where, like, they had this big conference and they had some book publishers there, and everybody was there, and I got hundreds of young people there. And they said, how many people, want to publish a book of poetry? And 200 hands go up, like, how many people have read a book of poetry in last year? Is like, one hand goes up. Dude, you got to buy poetry if you want to publish poetry. You got to buy some books of poetry. Oh, that's how it works. But in any case, I did have this lyrical ambition, and I think it ended up like I'm a terrible poet, or what I would say by my own estimate. I still write poetry, but I do feel like I'm trying to write poetry, but in theory, like using theory. But I'm trying to get this lyrical approach to it and express myself, but through like Nietzsche said, it's beautiful. But the problem is, like, you are some of the few people that have actually like get that. I don't know, but I do think there's that expressive dimension, and I do think it also has to do with the the question, like you're saying about two cultures. I mean, the question for me is theory is obviously not compatible. Theory is like uber literate, it's like the achievement of literacy. And man, you can do some stuff like Avatar Emergency 300-page book or something, 100,000 words. You can do something with that, but it's a skill. It's like, yeah, someone who's like knows how to fight with sabers and ride horses and stuff, like that's a huge skill, and you can do some serious horsemanship or whatever, but you got to have the whole thing. So the question is, it isn't going to be long before nobody's going to not only not want to read Avatar Mercy or even Derrida or anybody else, or even be able to, or there'll be a few characters around, but so the question is, what part of theory can transfer into electracy, and what part is just going to be left behind? And that's always been the question. I mean, Newton, as we all know, Newton actually thought his alchemy and his hermetic investigations were more important than his physics. But and he needed both. I mean, he needed to be both, an alchemist and a physicist. Astrophysics, astrology. He terribly guarded very closely his alchemical secrets, but of course we just forgot about his alchemy. So we think it's totally fine just to teach his physics, laws of motion and so forth, and not teach his alchemy. It's like, what? No, I mean, Newton himself would see what. And so what I'm thinking though is that I find theory very poetic now, and that's what I was trying to say. I mean, not textbooks. And it's, my undergrads are always like, can we just get the textbook? They always like, which book did you like best? They love the one that was a textbook. They didn't even know it was a textbook, but it was like one that was like very explanatory and summing up a bunch of other people's stuff. And then the original work was hard. The guy was confused. It's all over the place. But theory is like probing into what you don't know. You're probing in there, and you're using the theory to get out there. So you're like in this capsule, this theory capsule, and you got these amazing ideas, difference or rhizome or something, and you're out there and you're trying to drag things into the knowable and into the comprehensible and articulate. But the theory is its own kind of force, and I find it very, very poetic, because what I love about poetry is if you could say it straight out, you would. And Hallmark cards, they have no problem doing that. Roses are red, right? And but if in fact you're after something that's quite complex and ambiguous and inchoate, you intuit that it's important and real, and then you bring it into articulation. That's a poetic power and act. So I get, so I think I'm trying to, and I guess the last thing I'll mention when I come back to this is, as you know, mastery is a very important part of my work and my pedagogy for Electracy. And I got that from history, history, his story, her story. The feminist ahead of me had already said the personal is political and personal. You can't the real, hard Marxists were like, no, forget bourgeois subjectivity, throw all that crap out, and Marx, movement of history and so forth. And the feminists were no, the personal experience is political. Like this, the private realm, public sphere are interconnected. So then I thought that's absolutely right. And then I said, then I moved to the mastery, which was this idea that the personal story is actually not just ideologically framed or in terms of an identity problem or politics, but this larger fundamental relationship with becoming human. And we're saying so the personal voice is part of that. Personal is political, is putting that voice, which is emotion, which carries a huge part of signification and meaning.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. And I know that the my story, I can't pronounce it as smoothly as you're combining.
I do that on purpose.
Yes. Yeah, it's nice that
my story. Now I can always correct you. You say my story, and I say no, my story.
My story. Yeah, I have to fight this deep South accent to get it out. My story. But anyway, we had to do that in class, and it was very poetic. It was very poetic. Some people decided, to be more straightforward and autobiographical as they worked through those pop cycles, but some of us, and Dr. Fuller showed us my story at the end. He kind of held it from us so that we would work through the form ourselves. But I'm glad that so those who haven't read the books yet, and these copies are specifically at the Southeastern Louisiana University Library. It's like vignettes, and you really do have this kind of like fourth wall breaking, pop culture inclusive way of speaking that and this is when we talk about your books, it's a philosophical exploration as much as it is anything else, which was a unique experience going into a digital humanities class when we were expecting to just learn a skill set, but we got this philosophical edge to it. But that brings us forward to Electracy. So bear with us, Dr. Ulmer. There's a portion of our audience who has been exposed to this and a portion of our audience who probably has no idea what we're talking about right now. But if you want to follow along, guys, you can Google this chart. It'll give you a little bit of a guide. But do you mind explaining to us in ways what this apparatus theory is and what Electracy is, just Reader's Digest version,
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I'm capable, but I'm trying. Actually, the latter part of my career has been devoted to that. I have some colleagues I work with, and they say, Ulmer, please, just say it. And and what they want is they want the pocket Ulmer, which I want that too. And I'm thinking about Duchamp, like Marcel Duchamp, absolutely love him, and he had this idea of the valise, he called it his valise, which was he's going to take all of his work and he put it in a little suitcase. He took miniatures of it,
Yeah.
He'll carry around the large glasses in the suitcase version. I love that. I'm totally working on that. But you're absolutely right. And I totally get it. And believe me, I have been talking to people who didn't know what I was talking about for a long time. And a lot of those people had read my books too. So, so this is why I'm so happy to be talking to y'all, because I don't even know if anybody's reading those books. I know Victor Vitton's, the Clemson program. Oh man.
Yeah. We're frozen, Caleb.
Mhm.
If you can see us, Dr. Ulmer, we're frozen. We'll get back together. Hold on one second.
Mhm.
Not,
All right, you're back.
Alright,
You're
yeah,
back with us.
yeah.
We're back.
oh, yeah. Well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I just got a little notice there. It says my interconnection is unstable. So
It's all right. We'll ride through it. If we pause again, we'll just and we'll wait.
Yeah.
No big deal. Okay. Yeah.
right, you're like signaling, you're like, you know,
Yeah. That'll be the signal. All
Yes.
right.
But there is some, you know, and I think you and I emailed a little bit, Tyler, but you know, like the vocabulary, my vocabulary does throw people off, which again, I'm a little surprised just because if you're in the genre, like we're saying, with all this theory and stuff that is my subject matter, these folks use tons of terminology, and you need terminology. I mean, there's like now 1 million words and growing in the English language. I mean, English language, you know, you just can't keep saying gizmo all the time. I mean, you have to plug in some words. But and when justified, I mean, you know, not when you don't want to just be like, in fact, the joke with my undergrads was at the end of my course, I showed them this thing, and I forget the name, but it's one of these websites where you can like make you make your own products, like your t-shirt, like they provide the t-shirt, you can design it though.
Yeah.
And then they sell a t-shirt, and Zazzle, that's the one. And of course, I forbid the students to buy this stuff. I just made it for a joke, but I was trying to make the point that when you make your maestry and you get your image of wide scope, the image of wide scope has to fit on a beer mug. I mean, you got to get an emblem. You got to have an icon, you know, because like, why go around keep wearing, you know, Budweiser, you know, or Southeastern Louisiana, you know,
Yeah.
but no, get your own thing, your maestry thing there, you know, and so they were supposed to design that, and I designed these, you know, I designed my logo, my emblem of my image of wide scope, which is a sheriff's badge from High Noon. Gary Cooper throws the badge away. But I also made a T-shirt. I had a T-shirt with my emblem on it. But I also had a T-shirt that had all my words, like, and it's like cat on the back. It said in the front was like Cora, heretics, you know, whatever, all this stuff. And it's like, here, you go around and wear this shirt, and then it's a good conversation piece. I go to the party, the shirt, and they say, "What's that? What's Cora? What's Electracy?" You know, all that stuff. And it's totally good, you know. And I've sold about 3 of those in 20 years. That's okay. I'm not in it for the money, you know.
Right.
But yeah, so I was working with, you know, Derrida's grammatology, and I came to apparatus theory from really 2 sources. One source was the so-called Toronto School, you know, which is Marshall McLuhan, the most famous, Northrop Frye, associated with Walter Ong, Eric Havelock, people like that. And they did all the scholarship. And they have all the scholarship, what I call grammatology. And I am a grammatologist. I mean, if someone said, "What's your discipline position?" it would be, I'm a grammatologist. And the grammatology is the history and theory of writing. And what was discovered by the Toronto School was, and people that influenced them, was that literacy had come to its end, and we had run past it, and that literacy was an apparatus. And I'll define that term after I say my other source was the Tel-Quel School, which is French post-structuralism. Tel-Quel is the name of a journal published from 1960 to 1982. And especially in the 60s, they published everybody that was there. I mean, Derrida, Foucault, Deleuze, Barthes, Kristeva, you know, all these amazing and fabulous thinkers of that mid-20th century French philosophy. And they were sort of the theorists of apparatus, and the French word for apparatus is dispositif. And the key of this was that when we're talking about digital technologies, or when we're talking about alphabetic writing as a technology, the camera, or any of these pieces of equipment, that they're one part of an apparatus. So, because a lot of times there's a sort of idea, and even sometimes it creeps in what you might call vulgar McLuhanism, which is like, if you just change the equipment, you change. But rather, an apparatus like alphabetic writing is a technology, or digital equipment, is a technology. It's invented in 3 registers. So the civilization of alphabetic writing is invented in 3 registers. It's alphabetic writing that was invented, 700 BCE, or the Greeks got it from the Phoenicians. Not even just talking about Western civilization for now. Um, and then there's this evolution, and then in 387 or whatever, Plato invents school. So school is an institution of alphabetic writing that was created to invent. It's invented the operating metaphysics of alphabetic writing. And so he opens the Cora. I call this, get this Greek philosophical term, but he opens the space in an oral apparatus, because Greece, BC is an oral civilization. It has a cause and effect principle, which is God is the cause of events and so forth. It has a space and time metaphysics. Plato opens the first school, and in the school they invent method and logic and all the devices assisting. They use the alphabetic writing to support reasoning, the human faculty of reason, and they have a new principle. It's not right and wrong behavior, which is how you deal with God, but true and false record of discovering the principles of natural law. And the third part of the apparatus is identity formation. So people begin to experience themselves differently, and they begin to behave differently. So in an oral apparatus, you experience your thoughts as coming from a God. God comes and visits you, like in Greek mythology, Achilles' mother is a goddess. She comes and warns him before the Trojan War, don't go to Troy, you'll die there. So like he puts on a dress and goes and pretends to be a plow maid, in the boonies somewhere. But in literacy, you experience that thought as coming from yourself. I don't want to go to Troy. I'm reasoning here. Why would I? Who cares about Menelaus's wife? Thinking that, and then you run off to the boonies and wear a dress. It's a completely different experience though. And so Socrates is considered to be the first self. Like he's transitional. He's a hybrid. He's partly oral. He still hears a daemon, his voice of a little god that warns him, when he's doing what his behavior, right and wrong behavior, is off. Because that's what the oral religious is about. But then he's reasoning, critically thinking, true, false, right, wrong, true, false is different than right and wrong, and it's a different metaphysics. And so Socrates is a self. So an apparatus is, technology, institution formation, and identity behaviors. So the reason and the way we think about this in grammatology is, so now we're moving into a different apparatus. Our civilization is changing. And Walter Ong wrote a book, Orality and Literacy, hugely influential on me. And in there, he says, we're moving into and on McLuhan too, and a lot of other people. And he says, we're moving into an epoch of electronic technology, which is the technology part. He said, we need a different name for it. It's not literacy anymore. And he called it secondary orality. He didn't like that. He said, that's not a great name. And actually, I think it's inaccurate to describe the electronic that way. But so I said, okay, the great thing about that is we got not only different technology now, but here's kind of a template that, and this is the beauty and power of theory. It throws it over the current world, and you look around and you say, well, that means we have a different institution formation emerging. And it also means we have a different identity. We're now experiencing our identity differently than before. We're not selves. When we go online, we're not selves. And the people who go online are all disappointed, like, I only got 25 likes. It's like that's their ego, that's their self. You're not in there, you're not on there shouldn't be on there as a self, any more than you're on there as a soul, So it's a new kind of experience. And so there's like, we look for what is the new institutional formation? What is the new identity experience, as well as the technology? And those things are invented. This is thing like you and I, like in the humanities, like we have a role to play in the invention of electracy. This electracy is not being just invented by STEM discipline engineers at Caltech. Yeah, they're doing one part of it, but they're putting it out there and saying, come on, people, what are you gonna do? But here's the scary part. This is the threatening part, and this is the challenge, is we are in school, but electracy is its fundamental institution is not school. School is literate. Just like the fundamental institution of morality is church and religion. Like the church is not teaching Darwin. Like when they, if they're gonna be in the church, gonna be saying, we descended from the apes, people. No, they're not teaching that. On the opposite, but they want to get into school though and preach. That's not fair. We'll let you do your routine in school when we can come in and teach Darwin at Sunday school. But they're not going to do that. And of course, and then what happens is each institution tries to kill the other one. This is the scary part. Like, first, they threatened Galileo with the rack, they burned Bruno at the stake. I mean, Socrates himself was executed, for religious crime. And similarly, French Revolution and Enlightenment, they burned down the churches, executed the priests, and, Soviet Union outlawed religion as exploiting the masses, etc. So there's this big challenge, and here's the other scary challenge part is electracy is not going to be, because selfhood and the collective side of identity of selfhood is the democratic state. So literacy has individual selfhood and democratic political systems. Electracy does not. The democratic state is not, the nation state is not electorate. And electorate people are not experiencing themselves as selves. Oh man, whoa. So, and we're seeing the effects today. Science denial. That's like when I collaborate with some colleagues at MIT and I go up there, and one of the only ways I'm getting any attention from them is like I'm saying, so yeah, join the club, folks. They're like MIT, well, they'll always be giving us money. Oh yeah?
Oh yeah.
Not if they're into science denial. I mean, we've got a temporary reprieve just now, but like, dude, and we're seeing it. It's like people, I don't want your vaccines. They're full of, ideological bugs or something.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want my vaccines, and so it's a different metaphysics.
Right.
And so the challenge of education is to not to say, oh crap, because electracy is the corporation, is the institution of electracy. The commodity form is the formal operation of invention that makes that corporation work. Advertising is its sophistry, addressing human desire. Electracy is the apparatus of the visceral appetite, just in the same way that literacy is the institution of the reasoning mind, or religion, the institution of the believing heart, the will. These are human faculties, and our collective institutions are projections of our human faculties. So in the human being, we have, reason, Plato would say, mind, or head, heart, and viscera, and that's rulers, guardians, producers, and in the body, and then in the body politic, you have, similarly, we have the institutions. We have the home and the family. You have church, for belief. You have science, school, and then you have media, electracy for entertainment. And these are now projections of one another. Like there's an homology, there's an isotopy between the human faculties. And so the world that we have is a projection of us as human beings. It's not some other weird thing. Like, where did that come from? Like we're alienated from it. We say, I don't see my agency there at all. But the Vico, the Vikian history theory that guides grammatology says no, like verum factum, you can know what you make. And in fact, we can certainly know culture because human beings make culture. And now in the Anthropocene, we can also know nature because nature and culture have merged. And that's the two cultures you're referring to, Tyler, today. And so the world that we have is the world who we are. Problems be us. So we better get busy figuring out, how to live.
Yes, nice. Good stuff.
Yeah. So, in talking about those apparatuses, we are usually told that there's something lost, something that is valuable between orality and literacy, with the former being a bearer of social and cultural identity, as well as being seen as less laborious, while the later, at least prior to Electracy, is believed to carry more advantageous methods of dissemination, precision, preservation, etc. So do you feel orality or literacy has something Electracy does not or could not have?
Well, for sure. I mean, there's definitely gains and losses. And one way to think about that question, though, is that so like the underlying sort of question is, well, what is it? What is this mechanism, this motor that's driving the continuing transformation of the world? And we could, philosophers might just say being, life, aliveness, and the experience of what makes life worth living. This is human beings, right? And so, and the part of what I like about apparatus theory is it's saying, like one of the shorthand definitions of apparatus is a desiring machine. So it's partly a technology, yes, but it's also partly ideological, human desire, and human, imagination, human faculties. And so whenever anybody talks, so like sometimes people talk about like Electracy is the creation of a computer. No, it isn't. No, the computer was actually invented by literate people, just like writing was actually invented by oral people. So it gets invented in the previous apparatus, and they invent it for their own purposes, and then they kind of turn it over, or like because this new thing that they've created starts transforming people's experiences of the world, there's this emergent transformation. So, but so just, a really shorthand example would be, so people wanted to fly for ever since people like, damn, look at that bird, free as a bird, I want to fly. And so we're trying to figure out, and we couldn't quite figure out the right analogy. People flapping their hands, or like shamans, took medicinal herbs and flew, apparently actually did, virtually. And so we had this, and it was wonderful. Like a shaman, like you read like stories about medicine men, black elk, or Native Americans, or like from other earlier civilizations, the steppes and so forth. You read about these shaman. That'd be Paleolithic, and had this amazing experience. So we wanted to fly. So when we finally could fly, we got it into a machine. We get Delta Airline. It's like, oh man, is that all there is to it? Like, I lost my bag, they overcharged me. I was sitting in the middle seat. The baby was sitting behind me the whole time. It's terrible, but so it's like ersatz. It's like artificial flight and like real flight. It's just not the same. So like you lose this thing. And it's like, so in the Phaedrus, the first discourse on the method, Plato, through Socrates warns that, because the story of the Phaedrus is Phaedrus comes to Socrates for his lesson or whatever, and he's got a cheat sheet in his up his sleeve, in his toga or whatever, and like he's cheating. He's written it down. He's supposed to memorize it, And Socrates warns that artificial memory, which is writing is a technology of memory, artificial memory, is going to destroy living memory.
Oh, wow.
You're going to ruin your memory. And sure enough, it did. But of course, what it also we could say is it freed up. We were using our memory, and this actually all through the manuscript eras, until the printing press, the school, two skills you kept your commonplace books, was how you gathered up all your good saying, your topics that you were going to save up for then using for a good speech, but also memory palaces. You had to memorize your oration or your sermon. You couldn't read it. You had to memorize it. So once you didn't have to memorize it anymore, that freed up, the memory for other kinds of activities. So there was this trade-off. So today, in modernity, the equivalent is, and this would come from Paul Virilio, great useful theorist for us. And he warned that with the digital, you're actually digitizing perception. And so you're getting artificial perception, meaning that you're going to actually, in the virtual, in the online or in our cyber worlds, and really now through ubiquitous computing and augmented realities and hybrid realities and mixed realities, is everyday life is merging with our virtual technologies. We're going to be immersed in a virtual reality, meaning that it's completely constructed. So he said it's constructed phenomenology, it's artificial phenomenology. You can actually lose your living perception. Mm-hmm. And you're not even be able to look, and we're already doing that. It's like when you go to Niagara Falls, and the most spectacular things, and you got, and then everybody lines up at the photo op spot. It's like, take your best picture here, mm-hmm. And you can't see it unless, oh damn, I get this other one. People are falling into the water, like they tumble 1,000 feet down or whatever, trying to get the best shot at the Grand Canyon. But it's a photo op, the little sign there, it said, take your picture here. That's artificial. You can't even see the world without the image.
Right.
So that's sort of that one way of getting at that, of something gained, something lost with each apparatus.
Yeah. Why does it appear? And I know the secondary orality or second orality you were talking about from Ong.
Right.
When we studied the chart and discussed it, a lot of us in class felt that there was an analogy or more of a kinship between electracy and orality for some reason. Could you maybe solve that mystery for us? Are there some absolutes that the metaphysics are defining, or is it just the way that we're participating with it through it?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, McLuhan through Ong, I think, but they did feel that with the coming of the electronic era, that it had broken with literacy and had reconnected with orality. And there's a very useful principle here that McLuhan formulated. He called it retrieval. He said what happens is that as the apparatus shifts and as we change our behaviors, things that we thought of as being essential, crucial, are put into mothballs. Put them in the archive. You don't need them anymore. You can throw them in the trash heap. Like memory palaces, like all the techniques that were used for memorizing huge amounts of information. You don't need that anymore after print. So you forget about it. Well, now it's being revived, actually, in designing Second Life and virtual reality and so forth. Disneyland is a memory palace. It has the same features. So he had this idea of retrieval, or there's a great philosopher, Hans Blumenberg, and his view of that was reoccupation. So he says, in your methodologies, reoccupation. So he's saying, that what happens with each shift in the apparatus, or even just epical shift or paradigm shift, which is more modest change, like from manuscript to print, is that what the thinkers do is they reoccupy the old apparatus and they keep the questions but throw out the answers. So like when secularization happens, Blumenberg wrote definitive book on secularization. So as secularization happens, secularization is the emergence of finally the gradual emergence of literacy out of orality. So science begins to separate itself from school, science begins to separate itself from religion in the Renaissance, secularization. But he said, don't think of secularization as being, extremely like totally different, completely different thing. No, they kept the same questions that the theologians had asked. And what everybody wants to know is what's creation? So you go from let there, in the beginning, the heavens and earth, Genesis, right? For example. Well, now we got the Big Bang. Well, that makes more sense. Oh yeah, I'm totally convinced by that. Like, two different explanations. Okay, I believe you. So there's that. But so what happens with secondary orality? So that it's related to. So the argument goes that. When you get a new representation system, like you get the camera and video, movies, and all that kind of stuff, now you're not just recording the voice, putting the voice phoneme, into a letter, and you can now transcribe, phoneme for phoneme, sound for sound. It's a powerful technology, but now you get everything, the gesture, like the person, the character. All of that, and what Ong and McLuhan thought was that that's like you and I talking right now. That's like oral.
Yeah.
And also he was observing like at the collective level, like global. So he talked about the global village, and he was saying like tribal relationships were becoming dominant again. I don't think much of that is really held up too well. And subsequently, but that was sort of the idea. But the insight that they had, and also Telco people had, was that there's a sensorium. So the sensorium of the human being, our five senses. Let me get the little Gatorade.
Yeah.
It actually is Gatorade.
Yeah. University of Florida, I
there
guess.
You go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get 20%. I don't know. But was like, now I've lost my train of thought.
He was. No, go ahead. He was saying that you were talking about Electracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The orality. So the sensorium.
Yeah.
So the sensorium. When I tasted something, it just threw me off. It's like,
yeah, and we've been talking about Electracy the whole time. I didn't help you out at all. Yeah, right. Yeah, we're talking about your thing, right? Yeah.
So the sensorium, and the idea is that each apparatus privileges a particular part of the sensorium, human sensorium. Yeah. And all of our senses are always there, and there's syncretism and all of the synesthesia and whatever. They're all like unified, but there's a dominant one, a hegemonic one, ordering the other. So orality is auditory, depending on sound, all the rituals and rhythms and memorization, and poetry of the epics, and all of that is like oral. And then with literacy, when you can write everything down and visualize it, let's say Homer's epics in a text, and then analyze backwards and forwards, you get control of it, and you notice something new. So the idea is that literacy is visual, is the eye, is visually centered, and so then electricity, we say, well, does electricity go back to the ear? No, electricity does not. And also a lot of people think, well, electricity must be the eye, right? Is it vision, all this visualization stuff? No, absolutely not. But rather, well, what is it then? And the answer, and so I love this, the 18th century is the transition period. Of course, Immanuel Kant's probably the first, real philosopher of electricity, because he takes the categories that were thought to be in the world, within literacy, substances, categories that are in nature. And Kant says, no, the categories are in us, in the human being. That's his Copernican revolution. So space, time, and cause are not in the world, they're in us. It's just our perception. So like when people are saying, well, like, what's it like to be a bat? What's it like to be an octopus? Well, whatever it's like, it's not like being a human. I mean, their category system is different relative to their perceptions, and then they deal with the world, as the best they can. So that is so the sensorium of electricity, keeping in mind that it is the visceral apparatus. It doesn't support the mind or reason. It doesn't support, believing, belief and will. It supports appetite and desire. And this is challenging and scary. And here's where we get into the controversial part of electricity. And there's always some barrier. There's always some like sound barrier. You try to fly through it with your normal wings and the wings fall off. You just get, oh, we hit that barrier. And that barrier here is the sensorium. And I mentioned this 18th century dude named Brillat Savarin. He's considered to be, he wrote a book called The Physiology of Taste, and he's considered to be the Marquis de Sade of food. It's kind of a big philosophical cookbook. But he said the senses are no less than 6. Because he was including sexual attraction is a sense. Does anybody doubt it? It's like, you walk into the room, like Dante walks into the room, he's 9 years old, he looks across the room, he sees Beatrice. Bam! Like, oh my God. He saw her with his eyes, but that's just the beginning of it. I mean, so he saw her with this power of, called coup de foudre, right? The love at first sight, but he saw her with this power of attraction, repulsion. And the sensorium has been named. So if you want to know the shorthand, what's the name? Who are the people giving us, the philosophy, the ontology, the metaphysics of electricity? And it's a post-structural psychoanalysis. So basically what electricity is doing is learning how to operate in the world with the unconscious. Literacy gave us the metaphysics of the conscious mind, secondary process thinking, which is logical. Mm-hmm. Electricity gives us primary process thinking, which is also there, absolutely real. Call it the unconscious. It's inside, outside. But so Lacan is probably from Freud, but so he suggests, he calls it a mythological organ. He says it's not action organ, but he called it the lamella. It's sort of a joke, but from the omelette, like of the French l'homme, and then in an omelet, you could break the eggs and it spreads out. Is sort of the image of it. But so the lamella is the surface relationship among the erogenous zones of the human body. And this is the sensorium condition of sexual attraction. And it is the sensorium to electricity, what the eye is to literacy, the ear is to orality. Now, this is tough sell because, so look at this. It's like we had to be told that sexual attraction was a sense, It's like we keep our pornography all over here on the side, and it makes 10 times as much money as a regular entertainment industry anyway. Why do we do that? Yeah. Well, for one thing, because I don't have to explain, but because otherwise who would watch, Meryl Streep? I don't know. But oh my God, I can't believe I would. I prefer. Anyway. So but so this is the thing about apparatus shift is like you got to, so we're gonna saying we gotta deal with this because, and what, the saving grace is our technologies, and what do? They address our sensorium. They address, the formal devices of aesthetics, you know, address our pleasure and pain, and that's where we live. I mean, that's the part of human capability that's been left out. Every previous apparatus, orality called a sin, literacy would try to be like medicalize it and everything. And it's like, and man, it's running wild, where it's killing us because we can't get a hold of it. And it has to do with love, hate, and ignorance, and like we got to have I don't want to call it the science of that, because in fact, Electracy doesn't deal with it by means of science. Science has been trying to deal with that. It's not being very successful. Religion trying to deal with it, world's full of sinners, and they just forgive them, and they give you some money, and it all works out. So the new order is entertainment. We're addressing it by means of entertainment, and we're talking serious virtual reality, full immersive, fictional fantasy, running the entire world, every aspect of it. And if you want to see what that means, is you look at the Japanese otaku, the Japanese fan culture of anime, manga, and so forth. And it's global. It's an enormous business, because corporation. And what happens with otaku is your ideological commitments are subordinated to the fictional world that you love. Like you don't want to ever leave that fictional world. You care more about what happens to that character than what happens to your own family. And certainly to your emperor or another idiot politician. And the downside of that is QAnon is absolutely electrate, totally electrate. It's like in a bad way. I mean, but there you are, it's like this fictional world is completely invaded and mixed with the real world. And people are electing these people to Congress, and they're going into pizza joints and looking for Hillary Clinton's, child molestation rings in the basement, so they're mixing reality. And by the way, so the analogy here, the comparison is theme park theming, the theming of the world. This is super real. This is major deal. It's like for secularization, when literacy finally emerged from morality, as I was saying, call it secularization, begin to replace the powers, the nation state separates from the Holy Roman Empire, you get the political system, science, the schools break from the theologians, secularization, literacy finally comes into its own, not until the Renaissance. Theming is similarly, Electracy is breaking from literacy. And its fantasy is starting to flow out into everyday life and acquire its own power, entertainment, acquiring its own power. And by entertainment, I mean all the ways we stimulate ourselves, not only watching movies, but I mean drugs and all those kind of things we do for entertainment. Use that in a really big way. It's becoming the new site of power and politics and ethics and identity, and that needs an invention. It needs a rhetoric. The role of school here is to sort of get at a meta position where we can see, realizing that Electracy is one of the four human faculties, that in this history of the apparatus, that it has to be, yes, it has to be, we have to thrive in its terms, but also we need to see how to relate Electracy with the other apparatus in a way that supports justice and well-being, and we're not doing that right now.
Right. It actually is very interesting that you bring up theming, because we do like to try to connect the guests that we have on our interviews. And Earlier this semester, we spoke with Linda Wolverton, who is the screenwriter of Beauty and the Beast, Maleficent, and a lot of other Disney box office hits.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
you have a very interesting analogy for Walt Disney and Plato. Would you mind sharing that with us now and with our
Yeah,
viewers?
that's good. And I think we're probably needing to wind up here. I'm sorry, I'm seeing the time, but this might be good. So exactly. And so one of the arguments I have with some of my friends, intellectuals and scholars, admirable gentlemen and scholars and all, and they really don't like Walt Disney, and they don't like Disney World. And hey, come on, who do you think's paying my retirement? It's like, come on over, go to Orlando, dude, and
Yeah.
the sales tax. But Disney is global, right? And it's a corporation, but it started, so I'm saying Walt Disney is the Plato of Electracy. That is, like, Plato didn't invent literacy, alphabetic writing been around 400 years. Hesiod been 200 years before him, and he learns from that. But Plato is sort of like your prototype guy. He kind of like comes at the right time. He puts it all together. He starts the first school, the Academy in Athens. He invents the dialogue as a new genre to support, to help the transition from orality to literacy. Illiterate people help them become literate through the dialogue. And so he founds a school. He invents, the dialogue form, and he invents, helps invent conceptual reason, methodology, and so if we look at Disney, fills that same role in Electracy. So like Plato's most famous dialogue, the Republic, where he describes the sort of ideal city for literate education. Disneyland is that for Electracy. And so the analogy would be, so like Plato's school, Disney theme park. Plato, so Plato is science, Disney is entertainment. Plato's dialogue, Disney is animated cartoon. Plato's Socrates, Disney's Mickey Mouse. Plato's dialectic is, the gag, the cartoon joke.
Yeah.
Plato's idea, and by the way, idea comes from eidos, which just means shape. He takes a concept and shapes it, is the plasmatic line, Disney's plasmatic line. And Sergei Eisenstein, one of the inventors of montage, he absolutely loved Disney. In fact, everybody loved Disney in the 20s when Steamboat Willie, there you go. Steamboat Willie is like the Faders. And they just like were knocked out by it. The only person as popular as Disney was Charlie Chaplin. But the plasmatic line, so it moves into this hyperreal condition, not limited by the demands of reality, even the way photography is, or even manipulated photography. You can do anything with it. Like, Felix the cat, at some point he's like gotta get on this zip line. He takes his tail off and uses it to hook to hang, slide down a zip line, puts his tail back on. It's like, yeah, like just complete support for the imagination, separated from any limitations. And that's the force that is going to carry Electracy into this new kind of dimension.
Yeah. Well, with that, creativity, production, which is a big thing you talk about. But here's a question, especially since I spoke of that speculative rhetoric, rhetorical speculations, actually, book. Has the increase of virtuality during the pandemic and into this post-pandemic era, has it affected your perspectives or theories? Have you come up with, has it created any creativity within you, this whole new world we're in,
Yeah. No, that's hugely important issue. And I think it, it's hard to say, just because I was retired at the end of 2015. And so I didn't have to do, I've been teaching in network writing environments. I've been teaching computer classrooms since 1994. But, the students were present, and, we did all our assignments online and everything, but we met weekly and et cetera, so I don't know. I really admire my colleagues, and I know you've probably done it too, because I follow friends and Facebook and everything. And wow. I mean, the challenge for education to completely go virtual and Zoom. My granddaughters have had a year of virtual schooling, here in Gainesville, and like, wow, what a challenge. But I think it happened. A couple of things happened. I mean, the basic insight of grammatology is that the first step is, and McLuhan said very well. He said the content of the new media is the old media. So it's like when you got writing, you got, wow, suddenly you got writing. What are we going to write? And the first thing they did was they copied down all the oral stuff. So they copied down the epics and everything like that, so that the old media was the content of the new media. And then they had it written down and transformed it to begin to see some new things. So the first step was sort of getting everything written down. Well, similarly with Electracy, the first step was getting everything digitized. There are these projects, just digitize everything, and then, run, database analysis, what they call network ontologies and stuff to actually read the books, because no one's going to read the books. However, there's whatever 8 million digitized books. No one's going to read them, right? Except the computer's going to read them. They have teaching computers how to read them. But also movies. So what movies do is take all the novels. I think every Academy Award winning film since they're given the Academy Award has been either a novel, a short story, or original screenplay. They're all written, and then they film them. So it's like they're getting it all into the archive. And now, subsequently, we're starting to take the results from that, emergent, unforeseen possibilities, like with virtual reality and so forth. So what happened with this amazing 2020 and the complete, sort of general accident, really, I would say it happened. Everything happened at once, simultaneously, everywhere in the world. Complete disaster. It really, I think, has opened our eyes. I mean, I think sort of all school went online at once, and I think the big proof of it is it doesn't work. If you're online and you're saying, how can I give a test and be sure people aren't cheating? It's like, wait a minute, that guy was that his avatar, or was did he record that? Or, they're all like, and it's like, oh, it doesn't fit, man. It's like with when they first got the printing press, the way school was taught in the manuscript era was like you had the book, you went to the town, put a poster, everybody came, and they had all the writing materials, and then you dictated the book to them. And it took a semester. And at the end of the semester, they had the book. They paid you, and then they went to the next town and they read the book. So what happened in Renaissance when you got the printing press, it was like students showed up the first day with the book. And they're just saying, now what? Like,
Yeah.
and they had to invent hermeneutics or something else. Like,
Yeah.
Well, so it doesn't fit. So part of that evidence, and a lot of our other institutions, I think it really showed that we've been running on empty for a long time. Like the institutions that were created within literacy in the democratic state, what do you call them? Schools, hospitals, police, you name it. They don't work, or they work only because people are just like, it's kind of like Ptolemy. Like Ptolemy, you could explain the movement of planets and stuff in a geocentric way. It was complicated as crap, though. Like you had to really work at it. Whereas, and this is Occam's razor. Whereas if you said, well, wait a minute, what if the Earth goes around the sun? Suddenly it solved all your problems. It was like so much simpler.
Yeah.
Maybe heliocentrism is right.
Yeah.
But just because it's a lot easier. So if no other reason. And so I think, that's sort of where we're like, this is a motivation for us to take seriously. I mean, the reason why people would listen to Electracy, and especially Konsult, if we can just like mention that, is this idea of collective pedagogy, where you deliver knowledge to a collective, where there's a site of problem in the community, and but if and we say, look, if the idea is that if you confront a disaster, that's the point of departure for Konsult. You confront a disaster. Like right now, I'm working with my group, Florida Research Ensemble, working on the U.S.-Mexico border crisis. That we're interested in. We've worked on others, but you can't solve it. Like thoughts and prayers aren't solving it. I mean, go ahead, pray. That's great. The scientific, we know scientifically why the people are coming. Like, okay, climate change. You can't grow a stick, in Central America anymore. Roman Catholic Church. I mean, we know this, but still the problem persists. Like that knowledge doesn't help us. So why would you try Electracy? Why would you try a different orientation towards disaster? And it would be because the other ones aren't working. This scientific revolution, any change, the paradigm shift, when the anomalies accumulate to the point where it's not working. It's like, I don't know, it's like, I mean, now it's like, I don't know, it's been 57 mass shootings since March, 7th or something. It's like, seems like every single day, some Black citizen is murdered by a white cop. I mean, it's like people say, well, they're one at a time, right? But it's like, it's to the point where it's accumulating. And it's just like, well, we need to try something different. Now, so that's like good. It gets people in a state of mind where they might want to try something. The downside is Electracy is not a quick fix. Like you can't like say, well, I've got a little gizmo that you download it and pay $7 a year, you can stream Electracy. But rather it's this metaphysical shift. And it's not even going to happen in schools. Like I say, schools can be electorate in the way that churches can be literate. We got religion of the book, but it's still metaphysically religious. Yeah. And it's not, and it's fine. They should be, it's like, we don't want schools becoming corporations, but, we need to have new orientations, like I'm saying, entertainment, to address our politics and our ethics, and reimagine, care and well-being. And I put that on you. It's like, I'm old, I'm pointing a direction. You all gotta do it.
Yeah. Well, that clears up a lot, because I know that one of the struggles when our discussions in class over the material was, how do these apparatus coexist, which is a thing that needs to be figured out. I mean, they're not all there, but we have a question from a student page, is filled in it page. What you got for Dr. Ulmer?
We have a question from Christian, who asks, just as literacy appears disproportionate due to economic or education status, do you feel that Electracy will have similar disproportions?
In terms of like, access to it and
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
so forth. Yeah. Well, so the answer there is that is what happens in history of the apparatus is, my example in writing would be, at the beginning, the only person that had writing was the pharaoh. Right, the pharaoh had writing. Actually, the pharaoh couldn't write, but the pharaoh had scribes that could write, and they built this humongous and amazing, extraordinary, temple. I mean, and carved on its walls and so forth. And the pharaoh wrote, I'm the pharaoh. I'm the big cheese, and I won the war, and etc. So they had writing. Nobody else did, and it took forever and stuff. And now, so they never imagined, paperback books. So what happens is there's this slow, gradual democratization. It's just like with the history of money, the invention of money. At first, money, people didn't trust it. So like, you took a valuable thing, but you put the valuable thing in another valuable thing, and then you encased that in a thing and you inscribed on it and so forth. And pretty soon, to go buy a pack of cigarettes, you had to have a caravan. You had a cartload of stuff. It was like, you had 75 cents in there. And it gradually to the point where it's like credit cards. They went off the gold standard. That was bad enough. It was like money. What is that, paper? And now they're inventing stuff, and just watch what happens with money. Because like these credit default swaps that caused the big recession, the Great Recession, 2008. Like, those guys graduate from Princeton, they get their finance degrees, and they go and they're trying to be Jackson Pollock, right? They're trying to cut the cord with reality, right? And they're trying to like erase the difference between a Ponzi scheme and a stock market. And it's like, why not? It's just like, if you believe that money is in there, it's in there. you know, and you say, I don't know. I mean, I go to Amazon and I put in some numbers and then they send me a book.
Yeah. Cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah,
That's
and
oh,
now Bitcoin, that's a weird one. I'm telling you, we don't even want to get started in there, but that's the pattern where so yeah, Electracy at first was like, in fact, I actually went to a conference on the 50th anniversary of ENIAC at Penn, where ENIAC was during World War II was invented, created. I went there and gave a talk 50 years later, and when I saw ENIAC, it filled the room. Like it's a big room, and like that was your computer. And people at the time thought it developed a little UNIVAC and stuff, but they thought like, well, the United States of America is probably going to need about 6 of these. That's it, And they didn't think about human desire. They thought the technology, they're thinking that they know it's a machine. They didn't know about it's a desiring machine. And so like when the first laptops, the very, very first ones that were created, it was like basically what they could do is add and subtract. And it took forever, like 4 plus 4, and like an hour later, it's like 7.
It's wrong.
So it's like, but he said nobody's gonna want this. Why would anybody want this? And of course, they sold like 3,000 of them to just like idiots, But no, but cutting edge. I mean, for early adapters. And now, look. I mean, the iPhone and just this is astonishing. This is astonishing. So what happens is, it takes a little while, but it catches up and gets ahead of us, from the equipment side. I think the other challenge though, like we're saying, the desiring machine. So there's this educational side, there's this dispositive side, there's the learning, there's the invention of identity behaviors. That's where we get way off balance. So like Lev Manovich, Laws of New Media, and he says, well, Dadaism, and see my argument, is that the logic of Electracy was invented in Paris in Montmartre, in the cabaret scene of the 1880s, leading ultimately, culmination in Zurich, Cabaret Voltaire. Dadaism is like the pure language of creativity, or call it language design operation of creativity. There it is. I mean, it's been invented. Now we have to, just like Plato invented conceptual thinking, invented method, the dialectic. He had to get it out of the Athens school and spread it over the world. And it took 2,000 years. But Lev Manovich says, well, look, Dadaism has already won in our software. Our software is Dada. It's cut and paste, and it all is. So it's all Dadaist, but our culture's not Dada yet. Like you gotta catch up. You have to invent the practices that make it possible for ordinary people to use Dada without worrying about whether they like Duchamp's urinal or not.
That's right. Good stuff. Yeah, in that digital humanities class, remixing, sampling, which you do see in the arts, but bringing it over to the other things. But great.
So are you currently working on anything?
Yes. I must say I have enjoyed retirement, and I think partly because my son and his family lives here in Gainesville, so like it's really been a blessing during 2020. Have some family, and our family circle was great. But also I've been really busy with the Florida Research Ensemble, and this is something I recommend for anybody working in Electracy, is you should collaborate. You got to work in collaborative groups, and for lots of reasons. But one of them is that like the skill set of Electracy is just terrifying. It's like what, like it's getting easier and easier, but still, like, and I was on some committees and things, University of Florida. University of Florida is very forward-looking and very, you know, savvy and so forth, and tried his best, but institutionally, it's really hard. We were trying to get an institute that you know, took the skill set for Electracy and put it all into one entity, you know, and it was drawing upon needed cooperation of three different colleges, you know, liberal arts and sciences, computer science and engineering, fine arts. So you need, you know, you need graphic design, you need, you know, programming, you need like narrative and cultural theory and that kind of stuff. You need it all in one. Now, there are some places that do that. The RCID program at Clemson puts all these together. University of Virginia's got a program. Duke's got a program. I think University of California, Santa Barbara. I mean, there are places that do it, that, you know, that do put these all together, and that's got to be the future. In fact, they call that translational. There's a movement in various institutions. It's translatability, translational center, or something. I can't quite remember the right word, but like I spoke with some folks here that's like in the health related field, and so they say like from bench to bedside. So they take all the different parts of the healthcare process, from absolutely, you know, pure research through to, you know, caregiving at the very other end, and everything in between, and put it all into one center and have everybody communicating with one another and coordinating and thinking about these things together. But in any case, so the skill set, you know, there's cross-cultural things. So the Florida Research Ensemble, this group I have worked with since the 1990s. And, you know, I'm the theorist for that group, but then it's got like architect and, you know, creative photographer, like arts and architecture people, and they've got serious skills. I mean, I'm working with John Craig Freeman right now. Used to be at Florida, he teaches at Emerson, but he's like augmented reality guy, virtual reality guy, astonishing skills. And so we're working on Konsult. So we're saying, what is Konsult? Both, you know, as a pedagogy, you know, Konsult, the definition is to Electracy, the digital apparatus, what dialogue is to literacy, the alphabetic apparatus. And it's the one unified pedagogical orientation that brings people from literacy into Electracy, and like Internet Invention, you know, as a subtitle. And so we're experimenting with what Konsult is and how it works applied to US-Mexico border right now. And Craig's working on the augmented reality part of that. And so we're adding some artificial intelligence features to it and so forth. So the idea would be that we could actually make something, not me writing a stupid book, although it probably will include a book because I'm involved, so be a book in there somewhere, but they actually would, like, people say, what's Konsult? And then you would go to this thing, you know. I'm telling you, and like Craig's working on seeing, like, think of these things where you take your iPhone, like he's got this amazing footage from Wuhan, because it just so happened that he was in Wuhan, China a couple of years before, in like 2018 or something. And like he did all this AR footage of the market. He's got, it doesn't even exist anymore because the Chinese went in there, and like the day after they discovered it was the source, and they just ran everybody off and tore it down. But he's got this footage. So like, and he's working with these people, and you can like put in something in here, and then you step back and you've got Wuhan market where you are in your kitchen. The guy's selling you a chicken or something.
Yeah.
And or a bat.
A bat, yeah, about to say.
So wow, it's cool stuff. And also he creates these virtual reality pods. And you go in there and talk with people. You know, it's like scary bad. And like he's trying to get me into headsets and all this. And so
yeah, well, we're glad to hear you're working on stuff. That's the end of our time. And I'll tell you, Dr. Ulmer, you don't have to pledge it here, but we'd love to have you back in the fall. There's just so much to unravel and unpack. But to all the folks out there listening, this is Dr. Gregory Ulmer. I did forget to mention that he is a Professor Emeritus with the Department of English at the University of Florida. So he's taking chill time from teaching, but he's still investigating and moving forward. Again, some books to look out here at the library. One of them that we do not have is Internet Invention, which is one that is taught from a lot, but Avatar Emergency, Konsult, and then we do even have that applied grammatology here. Show us that one. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Yeah.
It's actually not about electricity. It is about electricity, but yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
It's a collection. It's a collection of essays that weren't published elsewhere. They were
Great.
published
Wonderful.
elsewhere, but not collected in one book.
That's right. Well, he has plenty of literature out there about the non-literate, which is awesome.
Post-literate, yeah.
Post-literate, yeah, that's right. He's also, there's an online presence, people talking about his stuff. There's plenty of articles talking about electricity. He has contemporaries as well. I guess for the rest of us, one quick question: how do we get that T-shirt? Is it online or do we?
No, it's there. I mean, dude, I apologize for mentioning, but it's Zazzle. I mean, I can send you a link, man.
No, I'm telling you, I'm gonna get that shirt. I mean,
I would like it as well.
So there's 2 more sales right there.
Right. But you're gonna have to learn some definitions. People are gonna be saying, "What's that?" So,
I'll know Electracy a little bit. Cora.
You did good, Cora. You did that. All right, man.
But
let's be in touch. I'll be back in the fall.
Certainly. And real quick to give thanks to the department, Dr. Samuel Fuller, who introduced us to Dr. Ulmer's work, the department head, Dr. Hanson, production team, Caleb and Paige. This is Kendall. I am Tyler. On Monday, our guest is Dr. Pete Enns. He's a biblical scholar and theologian who has some really remarkable literary analysis of the Bible. We look forward to that. This is Dr. Gregory Ulmer with us, and we'll see you guys next time. Y'all be good.